Florian Wirtz should be dead as a footballer, not metaphorically. Medically, statistically, the numbers said his knee was finished, his prime was finished, his dream was finished. And yet, 3 years later, a football club paid over $150 million for the same boy the doctors once quietly wrote off. Nobody tells you that story. Nobody tells you what actually happened in that hospital room, or why a 17-year-old prodigy nearly walked away from the sport that made him famous before he ever got the chance to become great. This is the story football does not want you to remember because it is too uncomfortable, too raw, and too close to the truth about what talent really costs. Rewind to March 2022. Florian Wirtz is 19 years old, already being called the future of German football, already drawing comparisons to the greatest playmakers Europe has ever produced. He is fearless, weightless, gliding past defenders like they are standing still. Then, in a single instant, everything collapses. His knee buckles awkwardly during a routine Bundesliga match, and the sound that follows is one every athlete dreads: a torn anterior cruciate ligament. For most players, that injury alone is devastating. For Wirtz, it was catastrophic because it came at the exact moment his career was supposed to explode onto the world stage. The World Cup was months away. His name was supposed to be everywhere. Instead, he disappeared from the game entirely, forced to watch his country compete without him. From a hospital bed and then a rehabilitation room, isolated, in pain, and terrified that the version of himself the world had just fallen in love with might never return. What almost nobody talks about is the mental collapse that follows an injury like this. It is not just the physical agony of relearning how to walk, how to sprint, how to trust your own body again. It is the silence. The empty stadium sounds replaced by hospital corridors, the teammates moving on without you. The fear, quiet but constant, that your legs will never again do what they used to do instinctively. Wirtz has spoken about how brutal that period was, how the psychological wound cut far deeper than the physical one. Because at 19, alone with his thoughts, he had to face the very real possibility that his story might already be over before it truly began. There were no cameras capturing those 3 a.m. moments of doubt. There were no cheering crowds during the endless, monotonous rehabilitation drills. Just a boy, a torn knee, and a terrifying question hanging over everything. What if I never come back the same? But something happens to certain athletes when the world assumes they are finished. Instead of breaking, they turn obsessive. Wirtz refused to accept the timeline doctors gave him. He attacked his recovery with a ferocity that shocked the medical staff around him. Pushing through rehabilitation exercises most players would have paced far more cautiously. He wasn't just trying to return to football. He was trying to prove that the injury hadn't changed who he was. Every set of stretches, every painful step on the treadmill, every solitary gym session became an act of defiance against the version of his story the world had already started writing for him. And in October 2022, barely 7 months after his knee gave out, Florian Wirtz walked back onto a football pitch. What followed wasn't just a comeback, it was a resurrection so complete it bordered on unbelievable. Wirtz didn't return timid or hesitant, the way so many players do after serious knee reconstruction. He returned sharper, more explosive, more dangerous than before, as if the injury had burned away every ounce of hesitation in his game. Leverkusen built their entire attacking identity around him, and defenders across the Bundesliga suddenly found themselves helpless against a player who seemed to see passing lanes before they even existed. By the 2023 to 2024 season, Wirtz was no longer just recovered. He was the heartbeat of one of the most dominant domestic campaigns German football had ever witnessed. As Bayer Leverkusen stormed to their first ever Bundesliga title completely unbeaten across the entire league season, a feat no club had managed in the competition's history. The boy who was once wheeled out of a stadium on a stretcher was now the architect of history. Yet the true test of any great player isn't dominance at home, it's whether they can carry the unbearable weight of an entire nation's expectations on the biggest stages in the world. For Wirtz, that meant stepping into a German national team desperate for its next generational leader. A country that has produced World Cup winners and Ballon d'Or icons and expects nothing less than greatness from whoever wears that shirt next. The pressure was suffocating. Every touch scrutinized, every underperformance dissected, every comparison to Germany's golden generations weighed against him before he had even entered his mid-20s. International tournaments brought heartbreak, moments where the dream seemed just out of reach, matches where critics questioned whether the injury had quietly taken something from him after all. But Wirtz kept answering the doubts the only way he knew how, with performances that reminded the football world exactly why they fell in love with him in the first place. Going toe-to-toe with elite European defenses and elite rival playmakers who were supposed to overshadow him. Then came the number that turned this entire story into a phenomenon when Liverpool paid a fee north of $150 million to bring Florian Wirtz to the Premier League, one of the most expensive transfers in the history of British football. Think about what that number actually represents. It isn't just a transfer fee, it is a football club betting an enormous fortune on a player whose career could have ended silently in a hospital room years earlier. It is the ultimate proof that the boy who was almost broken by his own body became too valuable, too brilliant. He became too brilliant, too valuable, and simply too undeniable for the world to ignore. Florian Wirtz's story is not really about football talent. It is about what happens when the world assumes you are finished, and you refuse to believe them. It is proof that the moments that nearly destroy us are often the exact moments that forge who we eventually become. The torn ligament that should have ended a prodigy instead built a phenomenon. And that is the story football never wanted you to fully understand. Now I need you to answer something controversial down in the comments right now. Do you believe Florian Wirtz would have become this dominant if he had never suffered that injury at all? Or did that trauma actually create the relentless mentality that made him worth $150 million? Drop your answer below because this comment section is about to explode with debate. And if you want the dark, hidden truths behind football's greatest icons, the stories the mainstream media refuses to tell you, hit subscribe right now because we are just getting started uncovering the real stories behind the game you thought you knew.